Okay, at this time, I want to welcome everyone to our 1 o'clock 2020 virtual Lead Academy session. Today with us, we have Mr. Richard Parrish and Mrs. Laura Petty. They're Leon County 4-H, Leon County agents, and they're going to talk to us today about scholarships and putting your best foot forward. If you haven't done so already, there's a poll that you should see on your screen. If you can kind of let us know what grade level you're in. Also, our chat is open for questions throughout the session. I have made it so that all youth must be muted, at least during the presentation time. Once we get to the end, we'll open the floor for verbal questions. And at that point, we'll set it so that you can unmute yourself. That way, again, it just allows us to keep a better connectivity. Also, if any of you have your video on, if you can please turn that off as well. That too helps us with internet connection. So at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Richard and Laura and let them begin.
Well, thank you, Ms. Barrett. And just briefly, I will turn my camera on just so everybody can see that I am a real person and that I'm not a robot as some of those internet things. So I'm going to turn it off, though. I wanted you to see who I am. And we're glad that you joined us this afternoon for our program, Scholarships, Putting Your Best Foot Forward. As Ms. Barrett said, please put stuff in the chat box. And at the end of the program, we will be emailing this presentation to everyone that we've got their email address for.
And I'm the same way. I turned my video on just for a second so you can put a face with a name, but I'm turning it off.
All righty. So, scholarships, putting your best foot forward, regardless of what grade you are in. I know we've got 6th, 7th, all the way up through 12th grade. Now is the best time to be thinking about scholarships. You can never start too early. So hopefully as we go over the next hour, you'll pick up some pointers or some tips or some tools that you'll be able to use to hopefully benefit you as you go through that scholarship process.
Great. Well, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. So Richard, if you'll go ahead and flip to the next one. Thank you. So first of all, we're just going to start off by looking at the skills that donors are really looking for or expecting in someone they're going to be investing their money in. So what are those skills that donors are looking for? Then we're going to look at the scholarship process and the components that are a part of that. We're going to move in then to looking at where do we find information on available scholarships. Then we're going to really focus on a couple of tools and resources that would be really good for all of you to use as you go through this process. And then we're going to look at some tips on being the best scholarship applicant you can be. And then we're going to really have questions throughout, like Janice said on the chat or at the end. If you want to jot those down and then save them to the end, you certainly can do that when she unmutes your mics or makes it where you can unmute your mic and you can ask those questions, okay? So that's kind of our agenda for our workshop, and we plan to get it done within an hour, and we look forward to sharing some good information. So first of all, here are just some questions for you to consider. As you are looking into the scholarship process, we really want you to think about these questions. And again, we're not going to have a conversation about them like we normally would in a face-to-face situation, but I want you to consider these questions. First of all, why would someone invest their money in your education? So that's a very valuable question as to why would someone else want to basically give me their money to support my education? And you need to think about that as a scholarship applicant in the future. And what are the skills that you bring that would persuade them to invest in your education? And then the third question that we kind of pose to you is, based on your experience, your leadership, and your scholastic record, would you receive a scholarship today? So those are important questions for you to think about. That, are you going to be a good scholarship applicant? But more importantly, what am I going to show someone to invest in my education? So we want you to keep in mind these points as you go through the process. Most scholarship programs are competitive, and you want to stand out in a positive way. You want somebody that's reviewing your application to say, wow, I'm impressed with this piece of information or what this young person did. Stand out in a good way, not in a bad way, because that means you're probably going to be on that list of not getting a scholarship. And remember that every year there is a completely different pool of applicants. You don't compare yourself to what happened the year before or the 2 years before. Every year is different based on the application pool of that year.
And if I can add, not only is it a different pool of applicants every year, but in many cases, it's also a different panel of judges.
True.
So, just because a certain criteria was looked at this year, or the judges were looking for a certain trait or characteristic, doesn't mean that's going to hold true for the next year.
That's true. That's right. Okay, well, moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about that investment, a little bit more about the power of a good applicant. And when we say applicant, we mean that person. How are you well-rounded to be a good applicant for someone to invest? So, if you are looking at somebody and asking someone to invest their hard-earned money or foundation money, whatever it might be, but you're asking them to invest in your education, you need to commit to invest in your application package. So you need to put as much work as you can into making that, because they've put a lot of work into the money that they've raised to be able to give you that money. And is your effort worth the money that they are providing you? So just keep that in mind. It's all about the investment. That's what we really, really want to focus on, is they are investing in you. So our big point today is that you then need to invest in your application package to make it as strong as possible. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the components of the scholarship process. What all is included in the scholarship process? And we probably all know that there are many, many scholarships out there, but we have to be aware that each of them has a little bit difference in their scholarship guidelines. And so you need to be familiar with that and really pay attention to those. Also, there are college entrance exams that I'm sure that you have visited with your counselors or other representatives, and getting that ready, or making sure that you have all of those tests taken. And if you need to retake them to get a higher score, you have those.
And I would also like to just say, take those college entrance exams, those ACTs, those SATs, take them early in your high school career as a sophomore, maybe even as a junior. Don't wait until your senior year to take it the first time.
Exactly. Okay, so also the FAFSA, which is that free application for federal student aid. Pretty much every student going into post-secondary education is going to have that FAFSA completed. And so it's just a standard thing that, if you're getting ready to graduate next year, you're going to be working on that through the next school year, getting that information put in there. And that's related to your parents' income tax and that kind of information. And so that's an important component. And then as far as an application, the components of an actual application would include an application that you complete. Sometimes they'll ask for at least one essay. It just, again, depends on the scholarship. There's also the official transcript. Almost every scholarship asks for an official transcript. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those things, but usually your transcript will have your test scores on your transcript. So typically you don't have to worry about those, but in some cases, some scholarships will ask for more, like your test report or something along those lines. Letters of recommendation are also a common occurrence in a lot of our scholarships, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes as well. And then the interview is often kind of that final point of, you've made it through the application, you've had all your information turned in, you've done a great application so far, but now with the interview is where you actually talk to a selection panel that's having a part of, you've made it to this part, now are you going to make it beyond this? And that's kind of the breaking point. So remember that the scholarship process, it's not just, I fill out an application and I'm done. It is a scholarship package. It's not just the application. So keep that in mind, that there are a lot of components to the process.
Next we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about, well, where do I find these scholarships? Where do I find these applications? Where do I begin looking? And there's a lot of places where you can begin looking. And the list that we're about to cover is by no means exhaustive, but if nothing, it's a start. Of course, visit with your school counselor. A lot of groups and organizations will submit their applications or their scholarship guidelines and applications to the school counselors in order to be distributed to the students. So start with your school counselor. your extension office. There's a lot of 4-H scholarships that are offered not only through the 4-H Foundation, but locally, whether it be through local livestock shows or groups and organizations that support the local 4-H program. You might check with your extension office and see what they have in regards to scholarships. What are some organizations or agencies that your family might be associated with? Maybe a local fire department, or maybe maybe an electrical co-op or something like that. You know, what are some of those groups? Maybe a fraternity or sorority that your family might be associated with. Check with those groups. They might have scholarships available for furthering your education. As you make application to the college or university, a lot of times those colleges or the departments within those colleges might have scholarship opportunities available. So as you make application, as you visit with a college or a collegiate advisor, ask them about some of the scholarship opportunities available. And then when you look online, if you were to do an internet search for scholarships, there's a lot of online resources, an online clearinghouse, so to speak, for scholarships. And we're going to talk about some of those here in just a little bit. And as I said, this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are other places where you can find scholarships, but this are scholarship applications, but this hopefully will get your mind thinking about, well, you know, I am part of an electric co-op, or my grandfather was a veteran, and as a result I qualify for these scholarships or something like that. So hopefully it just gets your mind thinking about where are some places you can look for scholarships. Now, let's talk a little bit about tools and resources as it relates to scholarships. You know, whenever you get that scholarship application, first thing you need to do is read the instructions. What type of information is the scholarship looking for? And that will help you determine what type of information you need to seek out. If you've got your 4-H record book, that is going to make the scholarship process much, much easier because your records are already there. So it's just a matter of looking at that record book and transferring a lot of that information to your application. Maybe you don't have a record book, but maybe you've kept notes, or maybe you've been involved in some high school organizations or some school organizations where you've had to accumulate so many service hours. Maybe you've got record of those. So that would be a benefit to you for your scholarships. Your scholastic records, your grades, your test scores. As Laura mentioned earlier, you're going to need a copy of those official transcripts. So there's a place where you can get those scholastic records. Your family financial records at FAFSA, if that's something too, you know, don't wait until the last minute to complete the FAFSA. If you can get that done within your senior year, you know, do that your senior year, but start early. Don't wait till the last minute. That's really going to help you out in the scholarship process. Now, a scholarship notebook. This is something that most people don't use, don't even know what it is. But here in Leon County, we had a young lady who kept a scholarship notebook. She kept a notebook of every single scholarship that she applied for. She kept notes of when the due date was, when she turned it in, who she turned it into, and then she followed up afterwards. And by the time it was all said and done, her scholarship notebook was, oh golly geez, Laura, help me remember. Her scholarship notebook was worth over $150,000 whenever she finished.
Right. Yeah.
She kept very detailed records, and, you know, she made sure that she sent thank yous. I mean, everything that she did in regards to scholarship was outlined in that scholarship notebook.
And I'll say that in my experience over the years is I've seen just a small number of families that have really organized everything like that. And I'm telling you, a lot of times it has been the young person that has really taken it and done it. And I've been so impressed with that. But I promise you they have invested in themselves when they put all that together. And they are the ones that walked away with their education being paid for by a lot of other sponsors, but because of what they did in their application and making sure they crossed every T and dotted every I. So it goes back to that investment, and that investment in organizing that notebook into something that kind of helps you in many, many ways. And so we definitely would encourage that. If you're, you know, not the OCD type, you don't have to be that strict about it, but just having that information in an orderly fashion a spreadsheet or something like that that can help you keep up with all the details.
And not only that, this young lady had a few younger brothers and sisters. So she
Yeah.
has this notebook. So whenever her younger brothers and sisters get ready in a few years to apply for scholarships, they can go back to this scholarship notebook. And that's a valuable resource that they can use to hopefully benefit the younger siblings. And then finally, with scholarships, time. You know, time is a resource. Time is a tool, but don't wait until the last minute to submit that application. Don't wait until the night before to, oh my goodness, I've got to get this done and filled out by tomorrow, because you want to allow plenty of time so that you can do your best work, so that you can present yourself in the most professional manner possible. Think of submitting or completing scholarships like a full-time job. You want to do your best, and your payment for your work is receiving those scholarships. So don't wait until the last minute. If you wait until the last minute, it will be reflected in your scholarship application. Now, mention that there are some internet resources. This is by no means a complete list. This is just a list maybe to get you started, getting you pointed in the right direction. Here, this is the link for the FAFSA, website, College for All Texans, Fast Web, this Minnie Stevens Piper Foundation Compendium of Texas Colleges and Financial Aid Calendar. This website is maintained by the State Comptroller's Office. A lot of great resources there. The collegescholarships.org. There are some very obscure scholarships on there. You know, if you come from a certain ethnic background, or if you have meet certain criteria, I mean, there are a wealth of scholarships there, and then you just have to kind of dig through them and see what's there. And then scholarships.com, that resource also has some training tools and some teaching tools, some tips and pointers on how to complete scholarships applications, in addition to some scholarship opportunities on that website as well. Now, this is a website that it has really nothing to do with scholarships, but maybe this is a website, this onetonline.org. This is maybe something to look into, because as we said, you know, doing a scholarship is a full-time job, so you have to do your homework. This ONET Online Scholarship has information on careers, over 1,000 careers. It talks about the education and training needs of these careers, the job responsibilities, skills needed, the average pay. By doing a little bit of research on this onetonline.org website, this might give you some information that you can beef up your essays for your scholarship applications, because if you're wanting to pursue a certain field, knowing what the average pay is, or knowing what the job skills are, knowing what type of education is needed might be beneficial and helpful to you, not only in the essay, but in the interview process as well. So when you log on to the ONET Online website, and let me just say that this website is supported or is maintained by the United States Department of Labor. So, you know, this is not just some group or business that has put this website together. This is the United States Department of Labor in conjunction with the North Carolina Department of Commerce that has put this together. So whenever you were to come up onto this website, there's a lot of information here. And if there's a certain interest or a career that you're interested in, you could certainly fill that in the search engine. And you might say, well, I don't have any idea what I want to do. I don't know what I want to study in college. I'm only a 7th or 8th grader, and that's okay. On this right-hand column, there's this box that says, I want to be a. You click on that, and it will take you to a survey. It's kind of like a personality survey, but it's focused on what your interests are. And there are 60 questions, and you answer the 60 questions. And at the end, it will kind of point you in the direction of, based upon these questions, how you answered, this might be the career that you might want to pursue. And I'm going to say it's pretty accurate. I've sat through yesterday, when I took that little quiz, and the results were pretty accurate. So anyway, ONET Online, we're just going to quickly show some of the features that this has. So at the top, you can go to the search feature and type in something that you might be interested in, or you can go to find occupations. Well, So this is the find occupation. So I'm going to say, maybe I've got an interest in a career in the health field. So under keyword, I might type in health. And whenever I type in health, here are the top 20 occupations for health. But if you look at the bottom of this screen, it'll show you that in this database, there are 288 careers focused on health. And so you can show all occupations and scroll through all 288 health careers. Now, I will say that for this example, not all of them are related to human health. In here also are some agricultural health, animal health, whether it be veterinarian or animal geneticists. And there are also some careers in this health field that you might not think of. There are some careers in regards to maybe insurance, because when we think of healthcare, insurance is a big part of healthcare, but we don't think about insurance as a health career. And then even something as obscure as a coroner or even an embalmer. So, a wide variety of careers listed in the health field on this website. So as we scroll through this list, maybe dietitian and nutrition. I've been involved in the 4-H food and nutrition project. I've got an interest in dietitian and a nutritionist. Maybe that's what I want to do. So if I was to click on dietitian, it would take me to a screen with a wide variety of information. So at the top, we'll see that, some other job titles for dietitian and nutritionist. Well, there's a clinical dietitian, correctional food service supervisor, dietary manager. But as we scroll through the pages, tasks, these are 5 of the 22 tasks that a dietitian or a nutritionist would be expected to do in their job. What type of technology or skills are needed to do this job? Well, here's some software that I might need to be familiar with, a database, I need to know how to use Google Drive, Office, Excel. So it tells me some of the technology that I would need to know about, and I can expand this as well to show all of the tools needed. As we look a little bit further, this is the knowledge that I would need to know and be able to display as a dietitian, customer and personal service, language, know about biology, medicine. What type of skills do I need? I need to, certain skills related to reading comprehension. I need to be able to be an active listener. I need to be able to speak and to communicate. As far as abilities, deductive reasoning, oral comprehension, written comprehension, my work activities. This is what I might be expected to be doing on a daily basis in regards to getting information, establishing those relationships with my customers or with my clientele, detailed work activities, work context. So there's a lot of information on this ONET page. Now, this title here, Job Zone, is a little confusing. This job zone is a scale rated from 1 to 5, and this is the amount of education that is needed for that job, with 1 being the least amount of education, maybe not, a high school degree, or high school education, if even that much, all the way to 5. And job zone 5 would it be a master's or a PhD or even something to that effect. Also on this site, it gives you an idea of those people that are a dietitian. 33% have a post-baccalaureate certificate. 29% have a bachelor's degree. 24% have a master's degree. So it kind of gives you an idea of the educational makeup of the people in this field. Now, this next screen, it shows about the interests. If these are your interests, you might be good at this career. And if you didn't take that interest survey at the beginning, here's a link to it up here at the top as well. Work styles, what type of style do you need for this job? What type of work values, independence, achievement, what are your work values and how do they relate to this career? And then what are some related occupations? So I'm interested in being a dietitian, but I never thought about being a medical scientist or a medical health services manager. What is that? I can click on that and get more information. And then here it breaks down what is the median, or what would be my expected pay? So this is the national average, $29.46 an hour, which equates to $61,270 annually. Looks like there are 70,900 employees across the United States that are dietitians, but I'm curious, what is it in Texas? How do those numbers relate to Texas? So as we look at Texas for dietitians, it looks like the average or the median pay is $58,030. So it's a little lower in Texas than the national average. And you can see those comparisons for the pay. And then also the trends. Where do we look in the next 5 to 10, 15 years? Where is this career going? So we can see that according to 2016 figures in Texas, there was 4,960 dietitians in 2016. And the projected employment is that by the year 2026, we're going to need over 6,000 dietitians. So that's estimated as a 22% growth. So we can utilize the information on this ONET website to help build and to strengthen our scholarship application and to justify I'm going into dietitian because there's a need for it. Projected growth is this much, and then also if you want additional information, here are some websites on additional information for that career. And I know I used dietitian as an example, but for each of the careers listed on this ONET website, they've got very similar information and resources for each of those careers. So do your homework in advance. This is a great tool to provide you with some valid data, with some valid information to build your application, to strengthen your essays, and to help you wow over an interview whenever they ask about your chosen career field.
Okay, we're going to move on talking about just being your best scholarship applicant. And we're going to talk about go over some of those components again, and then get a little more specific about some of the components in your application package. So we've talked a little bit about this, but again, I just stress that there are more components than just, I fill out an application, that's all I need to do. There's a lot of time invested in this and getting it done to the best of your ability. So nearly every scholarship application will, of course, have an application. It's just real basic, name, address, those types of things. And as we talked earlier, many of them do ask for at least one essay, sometimes more, and you need to be paying attention to those essay topics and trying to follow that. And Richard will talk more about that here in a few minutes. And that's one of those things that's within your control. Now, a transcript at some point, what's done is done. You can't go change those test scores or grades or anything. So it's kind of within your control to a certain point, but you need to get official transcripts provided to you. And again, working with your school to request those in a timely manner. Don't go to your counselor one day and say, I need 18 transcripts tomorrow, because it's probably not going to happen. So you want to be in full communication with your counselor's office throughout the process, making sure that you have enough transcripts and that you are working with them to give them plenty of time to provide that for you. Many applications will also ask for the letter that you received saying that you were accepted by this college or school. It's just, again, another way for them to confirm that, yes, you do have plans, you've been accepted, and here's the evidence of that. Many applications or many scholarships will also ask for letters of recommendation, and we're going to talk more about those here in a few minutes, so I won't spend a lot of time working on or talking about that right now. And something else you need to be real aware of is that each scholarship has a different deadline. So keep in mind that every application package is due by a certain date, and you can't put off. You got to give yourself enough time to get that packet put together. And be very, very well aware of that deadline, and maybe give yourself a deadline that's maybe a few days or a week ahead of that, or maybe for a draft that you can share with other people.
Hey, Laura, I want to interrupt you for a moment.
Yes.
There was a question that came through on the chat
Okay.
about, especially in regards to transcripts. How would that work for a person who is a homeschool student?
That's a good question. I know, and Richard, you might be able to answer that better, or maybe Jana. I know there are, again, working with your schools, your transcript is going to be the same if you're going into a college or university. I would think that would be your same record of what you would provide. So just a copy of that would be good.
And I know in having worked with homeschool students in the past, in many cases, but not all cases, they were members of a co-op. So through the co-op, they had some program where they were able to have an official transcript through the co-op. And even for those students that were not part of the co-op, I know that the parent, as the homeschool administrator, they got on Word or something like that, and they created a transcript for the student on Word, and then at the bottom, they signed as the school administrator. So even as a homeschool student, you can still come up with an official transcript. It's just going to be a little bit different than for those that are going to a public or even a private school.
Also, I know from a previous session, they talked about this some, and they mentioned that check with the college and university or junior college that you're applying to, because many of them will have a specific form that it is basically taking care of what Richard just mentioned, but it's a form that they have you fill out. They have someone sign, whether it be your parent or a co-op administrator. So do check with your admissions offices, as many of them do have what's called, I guess, for lack of a better words, like a substitute transcript for those in homeschool situations.
And I see on the chat, I see a question about letters of recommendation, and we're going to get to that briefly here in a moment. So I'm not going to answer that one just yet.
Okay, so related to the interview, then we'll talk a little bit about that, about how you prepare for that, and then following up with those, whether let's say you got the scholarship, and making sure that you submit reports on time, making sure that you let them know about your schedule. Those types of things are follow-ups that are a part of that scholarship, that don't just go, okay, I got the money, I'm done with them. Many of them will ask you to follow up in 6 months or in every semester. So make sure you do that. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about what you need to be aware of for each scholarship. So again, we just want to stress that each one has its own guidelines. So you need to not only read them, but follow those guidelines, because that could be, if you don't follow those, that could be the first red flag for somebody to go, they didn't follow the guidelines, I'm not even going to look at their application. So it's very important. So there are some things you need to know about each scholarship, and this is where that organization comes in. So you want to know, what is the scholarship selection criteria? What are they going to decide who gets the scholarship on? Is it going to be on your experience, your financial need, maybe how well you did in school, your major in the future, your career plan? There are many other factors. And again, it's just whatever that scholarship group wants to provide as their guidelines, that is what you need to follow. So if you don't meet any of those criteria, then you probably don't need to worry about applying for that scholarship. You need to be understanding of how many are they going to be giving, and how much will be the amounts of those scholarships, and who is the sponsoring group that is providing this scholarship. Become a little aware of who is providing that. And then again, keep track of that application deadline. And again, this is where you can get organized, put this information to a spreadsheet or notebook, something that will help you to keep that information together and be aware of it as you go through the process. Okay, as far as some application, now this is just the paper application, or maybe it's online, whatever, but we're just talking about the application itself. So you want to make sure that you definitely read and follow the guidelines for each of those scholarships. Again, we can't stress that enough, that you need to be familiar with, if you get 10 applications, all 10 of them will not be the same. There will be some similarities, but there will definitely be some differences. So be aware of that. You need to be sure to complete all sections of the application. I've often been told, no answer means no score for that section. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then respond to those questions as they ask. If they ask for a list, then that's what you need to provide. If they ask for a paragraph or a statement or something along those lines, then that's what you do. Again, you are paying attention to the guidelines and following what they want you to do. You really want to focus on that quality and the impact of your experiences and what you have done to help others. And make sure that you spell out abbreviations, because we all might know what certain things mean, but who knows who's going to be reading that application. And so make sure you do that.
I have had the opportunity to serve on the Texas 4-H Foundation Scholarship Selection Committee twice. So I've read a lot of essays, scholarship essays, and in addition to that, I've served on numerous scholarship selection committees. So I've read a lot of essays. And as Laura mentioned earlier, even after you read 100 essays, there are those that stick out in a good way, and that there are those that stick out in a not so good way. So writing a good essay is certainly going to be a leg up. So as you begin to think about writing those essays, read the guidelines. Do they want an essay? Do they want a list? What is the question that's actually being asked? And you can respond accordingly. I will say that this year I was reviewing a scholarship application. It had not been turned in yet. Somebody asked me to review it. And the essay was about, what is your chosen vocation? Well, I'm reading the essay and they're wanting to go on vacation to the Grand Canyon. So make sure that you read and that you understand what the question that is being asked and answer accordingly. Because had that young person have submitted that application about what is your chosen vocation, and I'm reading about a vacation to the Grand Canyon, well, I'm going to be talking about that young person, well, as obviously as I am now, but that person's probably not going to be getting a scholarship. So make sure that you read, you understand, and you respond accordingly to what is being asked for with the essay. And and I know this goes back to our English classes. When we're writing an essay, the English teacher would tell you, well, you want to develop a good essay, start by an outline. Outline what you're wanting to say, and then turn that outline into an essay. And everybody would always groan because they hated essays. But anyway, develop an outline that emphasizes you and utilize that outline to build your essays. And make sure you write your own essay. Don't have your parents or your other siblings write it for you. Don't copy an essay that your sibling wrote 3 years ago, because I know that me as a scholarship judge, I like to ask questions based upon information that is in the essay and in the application. And I have actually sat in the interview room and I have asked a question that was talked about in detail in the essay of the young person, and they didn't have a clue what I was talking about. So I would also say, before you go into an interview, make sure you are familiar with your essays, but write your own essay, because that led me to believe that maybe this really didn't happen to this young person, that either one of the parents wrote the essay or they copied it from someone else. So do write your own essays. And when you write your essay, capture the reader's attention. Don't be just so far out there or so bizarre that you're going to capture that attention in a bad way. But this essay needs to be a reflection of you and of your experiences. This is your story. Tell it. The people that are reading your application, that are reading your essays, they are doing this because they want to help young people succeed in the future. So tell your story. This is, in many cases, the only opportunity that selection committee has to get to know you. So make sure you tell your story. And think about quality. Just because it asks for an essay does not mean you have to fill the whole page with print. Think about quality versus quantity. And I can honestly say, after reading over 100 applications at the end of the day, I appreciate white space. So don't think just because I've got a full page that I have to fill it. Tell your story, write your essay with quality. More words is not always better. And then also make sure that your essay flows smoothly. Make sure it has a nice flow to it. You don't want it to be choppy, jumping from one point to another, and the points really don't make sense. You like that essay to flow smoothly. And as your English teacher has always told you, at the end of your essay, as you wrap up, as you summarize, re-emphasize your main points. What do you want that essay judge, that applicant judge, to walk away with after reading your essay? A few other essay tips. When you're done writing your essay, set it aside for maybe put it aside for the evening, come back to it the next day or in a few days. Come back to it with a fresh set of eyes. Read it. How does it sound? Maybe you catch some typos that you might have missed the first time around, but rereading it, looking at it later with that fresh set of eyes is going to be beneficial. Ask somebody else to read and critique your essays, whether it be an English teacher. I know as a county extension agent, I've read a lot of scholarship essays from 4-H members who were submitting scholarship applications. So ask other people to read and critique the essays, and give them plenty of time to do it. Don't give them the essay saying, hey, I need this by 3 o'clock today, but, you know, give them plenty of time. Give them several days if possible to read and to provide feedback on your essays. It's going to benefit you in the long run.
Okay, we're going to talk some about letters of recommendation and just give some tips related to these, because these are another key component of the scholarship process. So basically, a letter of recommendation is someone else is basically putting their name on the line by saying, yes, I believe in your skills and your accomplishments, and I'm willing to put that in writing and then sign my name to it. And so just be aware of that you're asking someone to really provide some evidence about things that you have done beyond what you just say about yourself. And as far as who can write these, you know, don't just always think, oh, my teachers are the only possibilities. There are many others who can definitely provide some great evidence of things that you have done. And so you could look at some coaches, or maybe, you know, it could be your 4-H advisor or 4-H club manager or project leader that you've worked with. It could be, you know, if you're involved in National Honor Society, I know that's a teacher, but they're providing information somewhat based on your involvement in that program as well. Also, if you have worked, either gotten paid or have worked as a volunteer, find those those supervisors and get them to write those letters that can really highlight what you've done in that work experience, whether it be volunteer or not. Also, maybe religious leaders that you've been involved with, your youth group leader, a pastor, a priest, whatever it might be, someone, again, that knows you well enough that can provide that information. And this also talks about friends or friends of the family, maybe people that are very familiar with your accomplishments and what you have done, but maybe, you know, their career is pretty reputable. It could be like the family lawyer or doctor. Again, it's somebody that can definitely, not just because they have a great job, but it's somebody that is familiar with what you have done. So you have to have that combination there. And there's just so many varieties of people who you can get to write those letters. So don't just wear your teachers out. You definitely need to reach out to other groups, and it does give a better picture of your well-roundedness. Also, again, you want to review those scholarship guidelines because some of them are very specific about, one needs to be from a teacher and one needs to be from somebody else. And it just, all of them are a little bit different. So again, keeping aware of that. I know there's some chats coming in, so I just wanted to make sure, they're kind of communication back and forth. So, okay, just making sure. Okay. Also, you want to make sure that you try to ask for a general letter. So instead of saying, okay, I have this Susie Smith Memorial Scholarship that I'm applying for, can you write the letter for that? So sometimes if you just ask them to write a letter, date it, but put to whom it may concern, and then they can write about you, that letter then can be used over and over again, versus every time you get an application, you're asking them to then go write another letter. And I'm one of those people that saves it on my computer and just edits from time to time, but asking busy teachers or busy other community members to see if they can just write one general letter that can support you, that you can use it over and over again for different things. Also, making sure that you try to, if at all possible, ask them to put their letter on their letterhead, their official letterhead. Again, that would just provide some status to that, just let people know that these are important people that are writing these letters. And then after you get that letter, it's very important to let somebody know that you appreciate what they have done for you. And then even with that is, once you find out about the scholarship, whether you received it or not, you want to let them know, I want to let you know about that scholarship, or maybe they provided you a letter for many scholarships. Follow up with them and let them know. And especially if you receive the scholarship, you definitely want to let them know, thanks for helping me get this scholarship, because it, again, is a component of your application. You need to make sure you express your appreciation. Now, as far as requesting letters, these are some important things that you need to understand, that writing a letter of recommendation is not just a simple task. So make sure that you are very, you request it. Don't just assume, and like the second bullet says, that it's not anyone's job to provide you a letter of recommendation. It is a privilege for them to do it for you, but it's a privilege for you to receive that from that person. You definitely want to provide your writers with some information, not only about you and what you have done, but also maybe if they're writing for a specific scholarship, you can also get some information about that you can share with them. But definitely want to provide them a resume or, maybe a copy of your application that gives them some information about what you've done. Because if they're maybe your youth minister, maybe they don't know what you've done in 4-H or National Honor Society or things like that. So give them some of that information. And as Richard talked about the essays, giving yourself time and giving yourself time on those transcripts with your counselor, asking someone to write a letter, you need to give them plenty of time to write those letters and get them to you. So don't come in on Monday and say, I need this on Tuesday, because it's probably not going to happen. And it leaves a sour taste in that person's mouth. So give them at least a week, if not 2, for them to get those letters finished and sent to you.
All right. So as we've got our application done. So just a few final application tips. Use your time wisely. Start early. Don't wait until the last minute. Plan ahead. Who are you going to ask to review your essays? Who are you going to ask to write letters of? And even if it only asks for 2 letters of reference or recommendation, I would say, maybe ask 3 or 4 different people to write letters on your behalf. That way, in case something happens and that you don't get the letters in time or whatever, things happen, you've got plenty. Manage your time wisely. And remember this, computer problems happen. Computers crash, printer runs out of ink, internet doesn't let you upload. So plan your time wisely and keep that in mind. Don't wait till the last minute, because I would hate for you to be uploading a scholarship application online at the 11th hour when all of a sudden your computer crashes or your internet goes down and you're not able to submit that application. So please allow yourself plenty of time. As you've asked people to review your essays, your applications, request feedback from them, whether it be English teachers or neighbors, community leaders that review your application. What can you do to improve your application? Request that feedback from them. And something as simple as a typographical error or punctuation can distract the judges from the message you're trying to present in your application. So, look for those as people review your application before you submit it. Ask them to look for those typos and punctuation errors as well. And think about your application from the judge's point of view. If I were a judge, what am I looking for? Why would I want to award you a scholarship? Make sure that before you turn in that application, review those scholarship guidelines. Make sure you've done everything appropriately. If there's a score sheet, look at the score sheet. Have I done everything that the score sheet is asking for? Have I completed every section? The score sheet, by reviewing the score sheet, it can certainly help you know if your application is complete. Not every application, though, is going to include a score sheet, so you may or may not have that tool to use. Make sure that you place the requested documents in the order outlined in the instructions. Do they want your application followed by your transcript, followed by your letters of reference? Or what order do they want things placed in? Try and put them in that order. This is for the convenience of the selection committee. And don't add documents that have not been requested. If 2 letters of reference are all that is asked for, just include 2. Don't put in more. Don't put in a copy of your 4-H record book if it's not requested. Having sat on several scholarship panels in the past, that extra stuff that's been added, we've pulled it out and discarded it because it was not part of the application that was being asked for. So only include the documents that are being asked for. Also, make a hard copy of the application that you send, and make a copy before you send it and put it in your file. That way you can always go back to it. You know that you applied for this scholarship. You've got that information for future reference. And I said, make a hard copy. I guess that kind of shows my age, but you can also save it electronically. And I would suggest saving it electronically in more than one place, just in case your computer crashes or you lose that flash drive, you still have that application.
We'll quickly talk about interviews. I know we're about out of time, and so we'll just kind of go through these tips as Richard puts them up on the screen. So, you want to learn a little bit about the funding group. That's one of my main questions when I serve on a scholarship team or selection team is I want to know, if you want me to invest in you, what do you know about the organization that I'm representing? That's an important thing. And as Richard talked about earlier, reviewing your essays and stuff, that's a part of that application package. Be familiar with your application because I might ask you something specific in your application. So you should review the information in there and be ready for that. Also, there's usually a list of questions that are provided by different groups. I know with 4-H, we provide a lot of suggested questions. And so those are just questions to help you prepare as you're preparing for an interview. Be familiar with current events that are going on. Now there are a lot of current events going on, but at the time or within the last, several weeks of your interview, make sure that you are current on those events that are going on. And always practice, practice makes perfect is what we always say. Set up a visit with your extension staff or with your local banker or anybody that you think is person that does interviews in a regular practice. Visit with them, have them help you. You always want to dress conservatively. I know Charlotte Botting's always said, dress like you want to impress your grandmother. You definitely, maybe it's not a time to be the hip one, the hip teenager to look your best that way, but trying to be conservative and look your best for maybe an older audience that would be more accepting of the conservativeness. Make sure you establish eye contact. Looking around the room or looking at things on the table are not good practices. You definitely want to focus on the people in front of you. And if one person asks a question, respond to all 3 or all 4 people that might be on the panel. You want to make eye contact with all of them. And you always want to greet and even leave the room by a firm handshake. In all, we want to be confident, we want to be comfortable, we want to be humble. This is not a time for you to waltz in there and say, hey, I deserve this money and you're going to give it to me. It's not a time for that at all. It's a time to be grateful and humble and be confident about what you've done over your career.
Well, that's the information that we have to present to you today, and it looks like we got done with just a few moments to spare. So hopefully you were able to pick up some pointers or tips to benefit you through the scholarship process, because it is a very competitive process. But it's make it a full-time job. If you're wanting people to invest in you, you need to put forth the effort to do what you need to do to earn that, and it is earning that money or earning that scholarship. You're putting forth the work. Hopefully you'll be the one to be the beneficiary of that scholarship. Laura, do you have any other final thoughts?
I was going to say, Richard and Laura, at this time, I'm going to put a Zoom link, a new link over in the chat. For those of you that want to continue asking questions, because we don't want to cut off the dialogue, but we also want to be
Any questions at all? Whether whether they be audio or you can type them into the chat.
Or what other information do you feel like you need? I know you're kind of coming into a process that you're still learning, but do you still have just questions about where do I begin? What do I do?
And I know that especially for those younger ones, I know we've got some that were in the 6th and 7th grade, and that might be a little young yet. But even as I said, it's never too early to start. Maybe get a copy of those applications, of those scholarship applications now, and look at them. What type of information are they asking? What's going to be expected of me? And maybe I can start working towards knowing in the future that I'm going to be applying for this scholarship. I can start working towards, okay, it says I need to be involved in the community. What can I do to provide service in my community? we can do that now. You can plan for that for years to come rather than your senior year and you're left with nothing. So, it's not a bad idea to get those applications years in advance and start looking at what's will be expected of you.
We have a question too about going into the 11th grade. Is it too late to apply for a scholarship? Well, definitely not. I mean, you're going to apply for those most of your senior year, but it's important for you to get the information now, because chances are that application, whichever scholarship it is, chances are it's not going to change a whole lot from year to year. So go ahead and get those applications and be familiar with what they're asking for. And, if you feel like, okay, I've looked at this and I'm weak in one area, maybe that's something that over the next 2 years that you can work on really beefing up on your application, getting more service hours or taking on more leadership, just things that you can do. And don't think that leadership just means being elected to something. There are so many volunteer leadership opportunities, so take advantage of those. And I can't stress enough the notebooks or the spreadsheet to keep you on track for your applications, because once you start getting 10 or 15 of them, your brain really loses it on what's due when and what do they want. And even once you finish an application, it's important to kind of go through a check sheet and make sure that you have followed all the guidelines for that scholarship.
So the question is, our scholarship committee is going to look more at class rank, ACT scores, or involvement in activities? That's going to depend upon the scholarship committee. I know as I have served on scholarship committees, class rank and ACT, SAT scores are important, but I realize that not everybody can be number one in their class and that not everybody tests well. And just because I might have an SAT that's maybe not the best, I don't myself personally, I hold those personal involvement in activities to a higher standard than I do class rank or those test scores. Now, some of it's going to depend upon what the qualifications or what the guidelines are spelled out in the application. And some of it too depends upon the funding source. Laura, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I totally agree that it all goes down to what that scholarship guideline says. And a lot of scholarships will have kind of a scoring grid that they follow. So that if they hand that information to, let's say, a selection committee, that they have a guideline as to what they rank things on or score things on. And so, just if there's, 20% of the score is given to your class rank or your academic record, and then maybe 50% is given to your involvement in community service activities. It just depends on that particular application. So again, reviewing those guidelines, and I'm a spreadsheet person, so I can envision that spreadsheet that would say, have the columns that say, what's the scholarship, who's given it, how much and how many, and then some of that criteria about, this is they score more heavily on involvement, or they score more heavily on my activity or my financial need, or my they're only looking at kids in the top 10% of their class. Just depends on the scholarship. But keeping that information, and then sometimes you get so many applications that you almost have to prioritize which ones am I going to apply for, which ones am I going to invest my time in completing, because I feel confident that I fulfill those guidelines and I feel like it's a good fit for me to receive that scholarship. So there's a lot of factors in there. Sometimes you have to prioritize and decide which ones you really want to put the work into. So Nicole, I hope that long range answered your question. You're welcome. And I really want to say too, for younger ones, I know some of y'all maybe, like Richard said, some maybe middle school age, whatever, and you think, oh, I got a long time to go. But I will say that I've just had so many kids that are, in that 11th and 12th grade, and they go, gosh, I didn't realize how important my grades in my freshman year were going to be, or I didn't realize how important this or that was going to be until they get into their, junior and senior year, and they start realizing that there are consequences for not worrying about that grade or not worrying about that test. And so I just want to stress the importance of investing in yourself, not only when it's application and scholarship time, but throughout the time. It is so important for you to invest yourself in not only your academic record and having the best academic record you can, but also having the involvement and the community service and the making a positive impact within your community. Those things are very important, and it's something that you need to work on for years to get you where you need to be the best applicant you can be.
I guess, in many cases, they're looking for a well-rounded individual.
Yes. And there are some applications that'll just say, we just want a kid that's in the top 10% of their class, and, we want them to have a great score on their SAT, and that's really all we want. Well, if that's you, then apply for that application or apply for that scholarship. But if you don't feel like you do the best in those areas, then maybe you want to focus your attention on other scholarships that have those, that you can fulfill those requirements. Okay, any other comments, questions?
Whenever I send the slides, whenever I email the slides, I will make sure that both Laura's and my contact information is included on that. So if after today, if y'all have questions down the road, you can drop us an email saying, hey, I sat in on your Lead Academy presentation and I've got a question, and we'll be happy to try and answer those questions for you. Or I guess Laura will be happy to answer those questions for you.
Yeah, always be willing to ask for help, because there are lots of people who want to help you, but they're not going to bend over backwards trying to ask you if you need help. You need to go to them and say, look, I really need you to review my essay. I don't feel very confident about it. I need you to read it and edit it and give me some suggestions about how I can really, talk about the impact that 4-H has had, or the impact that some experience has had on your life, or talk about a role model that you have. Just, again, it's about getting the message across, because you can be the greatest person and be a full package deal, but if you don't communicate it in your application, then it doesn't get across to the people who you want to give you money. So rely on people, rely on your resources, human and otherwise, and get the help you can, so that all of them can help you invest in your education. You're welcome, Dr. Williams.
It's been our pleasure to do this today, and we appreciate being asked to do it.
Okay, well, I guess we will wrap up. I'm not sure if Dr. Williams, if you want to take over and wrap up, or what you need us to do.
Actually, I think Dr. Williams is Jana.
Oh, well, Jana parading as Dr. Williams. Shame on her, huh? Okay.
All right, well, we thank y'all for joining us today. And if there's no other questions, I guess we're going to go ahead and log off and let you get about your day. So thank you for your participation in your today. And we, like I said, be looking for the email coming in the next few days with our presentation from today.
Thank you. And goodbye.